Hello and welcome to Quantum Canine. I'm Tricia Selbach and this is Kevin Behan.
Good morning, Tricia.
Hello. And today we are going to be talking about dominance. And it's interesting to talk to you about dominance because your father was really the first dominance dog trainer in America.
Right. I believe he was the first one to apply the theory of a dominance hierarchy among wolves to the relationship between a dog and its owner.
And there was a fair amount of studies in the 50s that were studying captive wolves, and that seems to be the one place where this whole idea of the dominance hierarchy sort of became popularized.
Yeah, it became scientifically accredited through those studies. Although in my father's case, he said he watched a mother raise her pups for a whole year, which is really kind of rare when you think about it. Most pups go on their ways, and you don't see that. So he watched her discipline, as he saw it, the puppies. And then he formulated his idea of raising and training a dog and fixing problem behaviors based on, as he saw it, a lack of respect between dog and owner, or in the owner for the dog. He used to always say that every dog is born with an innate respect of a human, and then the owner throws it away. So that was his way. He looked at all behavior, all problem behavior, most of it. And then the science came along, and that's where he found, scientific accreditation for that concept. But he was probably the first alpha dog trainer, and right after World War II.
So the magic of what he did was that he looked at the wolf and extrapolated, what you could learn about dogs from the wolf. Where you departed from him was that you said what we're seeing isn't really dominance.
Right. So I had a breakthrough in the 70s where I realized everything was a function of the immediate moment. The dogs don't think, and we'll have to go into that at length at some point. So I realized that everything was happening in the immediate moment. Well, what follows immediately from that is that the information is in the energy, because energy is an immediate moment phenomenon. And the information is in the energy, and it weaves a group of dogs into a group, or it weaves individuals into a group. So energy, by definition, begets the group. So then I was looking at, well, why would that be the way it is? And it quickly became apparent to me that it's the hunt that produces the social, the pack, not the other way around. So all the theorists at the moment are saying the pack, a respect for subordinates to a leader, allows for teamwork and cohesion, and that allows the hunt. And I realized from my immediate moment theory that was completely inside out. We were seeing it inside out, in reverse. The truth is that the hunt begets the pack, not the other way around.
Oh, that's very interesting. And
let me give you a little background on that. Out west is the western coyote, which normally lives like foxes. And there's a solitary breeding pair, the litter, and then they disperse at the end of the year. So there's always these just a small group of foxes, and they hunt like foxes do, rodents. And the western coyote is much smaller than the eastern coyote. However, when there's high snows and they can't get at their regular prey, and meanwhile the elk and caribou are becoming vulnerable to the high snows, they can't protect their calves, they start to form packs. And they start hunting the young of the caribou and even the weak elders, and they form packs of extended groups. And they have dominant hierarchies. And when I use the word dominant, I always put the quotes there. They form a social structure that you could call a dominant hierarchy. They defend territory, and they become like a wolf pack. And then once they can get to the regular prey again, away goes the group, and they go back to that fox-like existence.
So the necessity for the pack is because wolves hunt animals much bigger and more powerful than themselves.
Right. They are emotionally driven to hunt the moose and the muskox and the bison, animals that are physically superior to them. Even when 10 wolves confront one moose, the moose can easily fend them off. So interesting question is, why are they emotionally attracted to the moose? But nevertheless, that mandate forces them, compels them, motivates them to want to be in a group. It is the basis of their social nature, not the other way around.
And the pack the pack life, as we've talked about before, when they're acting so-called dominant and submissive, what they're really doing is they're stressing each other out, and they're kind of building up the energy in each other's systems
Right.
so that they can go out and hunt these enormous animals.
Right,
and
right.
so both of the pack life and the hunting are sort of dependent on each other.
What's really fascinating is once you understand the immediate moment phenomena, you can zoom in tight to know what's going on within the individual's mind, and you can back out and zoom way out and see the species point of view, the instinct's point of view. You can even see nature's point of view, I dare say. You can even see the whole matrix in one lump sum, from one wide-angle view. So the immediate moment it's like an electron microscope. You can look in. It's like a linear particle accelerator. You can expand and see the tiniest elements playing out over the longest term.
So when you talk about immediate moment, you're saying the wolf or the dog, they're not thinking about what happened in the past. They're not thinking about what's going to happen in the future. They're reacting and acting upon in the moment.
They're going by feel.
They're going by how the other wolf is acting, and it's sort of a
Right.
ping pong back and forth.
Yeah, there's actually one group mind. It actually envelops the prey as well, encompasses the prey. And I like to reference Barry Lopez. I recommend people read Barry Lopez of Wolves and Men. He has a chapter, A Conversation with Death, where these wolves trot through a resting herd of caribou, and way in the far horizon, the designated animal gets up. He's it. He knows it. The wolves know it. All the other caribou know it too. They're just laying down. They're chewing their cud as the wolves go by. They could care less that the wolves are going right by them. And then they stare at each other for 10 minutes, and finally the caribou runs, they kill it, they eat it. The biologist Lopez comes over and does a postmortem and finds out that it does have the brain weevil, the parasite that gets into the brain. And so he was compromised.
So the wolves aren't thinking.
They're feeling.
They're feeling it, right.
My point being is they're feeling what is the energy of the herd, and everybody feels it. So it's a perfect communication. And now I came to these conclusions through my work with police dogs. And I realized, as it was pointed out to me, I should say, by some of my mentors, that a police dog never does the same thing twice. He never goes after the same criminal twice, and if he were to go after the same criminal twice, it would always be different contexts, different circumstances. So training by rote won't cut it. And training with this dominant principle, where the handler's dominant to the dog, and the dog is supposed to dominate the criminal, that doesn't cut it either, because you quickly discover dominance is unsureness, it's insecurity. So every police dog trainer in the world is purging dominant expressions of dominance from their candidates. They don't want to see that because they know it's fear. So I just said, well, if it's fear on the protection training field, why isn't it fear in the household?
Right.
What's the immediate moment thing going on inside the dog? It's fear.
Right.
And so the question I like to ask was, when we look at the tape, is who is in control of who? If we have to impose the idea of control onto what animals are doing, which is completely a concoction of the human intellect, if we were going to use that as a standard, who actually is in control of who? And you'll see it's the exact opposite of the prevailing mindset. Matter of fact, Ian Dunbar is a respected thinker on dogs. He's gone so far as to say there's a submissive hierarchy, not a dominant hierarchy. I would challenge even that, because that's still using the logic of control, but it's definitely much more closer to the truth.
So you're not saying there's one animal is exerting control as in like a pecking order,
Right.
but that there's a communication between the animals, and that there's an
Yeah.
attraction.
Here's an inviolate rule. So, for example, if you look, there is no evidence for dominance hierarchy. If you were to look at A dominates B, B dominates C, well, C could very easily dominate A.
Right, so it doesn't make any logical
There's
sense.
no linear,
Right.
Whereas in the United States Army is almost a true dominant hierarchy. The general, the colonel, the major, the sergeant, the private. There's a very linear structure. If the sergeant wants to get into the private's footlocker for inspection, if the private denies access, he goes to jail. He goes to brig.
Right.
But if you give a bone to the omega, and the alpha comes over for the bone, the omega will snarl at the alpha and repel him. Well, how come he doesn't go to the brig? What's up with that? Why isn't that insubordination? And the reason is there is no dominant hierarchy. So what there is, an inviolate rule, is whoever wants something the most goes first. and they all happily follow. That's actually what's going on. So there's a hierarchy of feelings. There is not a hierarchy of rank.
So when you're watching a wolf hunt and you see the so-called alpha male,
Yes.
he goes first, he runs first, it's because he wants that moose.
He wants the
most.
moose more than they
And
want the moose.
they all want the moose too.
They do.
So they're perfectly happy to follow.
Right.
And so all your training that you do is based on that. It's
Right.
based on a place of desire.
Right.
And not a place of control and dominance.
Exactly. So there's no such thing as control and rank in the animal mind. There is trust and fear. So how do you get to trust? You have to understand how the group. So where other theorists study how wolves live as a pack, I've contemplated how do wolves work as a team. And again, I had to learn that because of my work with police dogs. Because if you don't work as a team, the handler never knows where the track is. He doesn't know where the bad guy is. He has to follow the dog. So in the teamwork that's possible, the level of rapport between a police dog and its handler, they're constantly flipping polarities. Who's in charge of what depends on the moment. You can't have this linear hierarchical structure because you'll inhibit the dog's ability to take over when it's his time to take over.
I see, when he needs to go chase the criminal out
Right.
of sight
Right.
and hold him at bay.
Exactly.
It needs to be another operating system besides just the
Right.
police officer telling him what to do.
Right. Now, and then what's really cool is if you look at the wolf behavior in the hunt, that's where you find all that rapport, all that teamwork. That was catalyzed in my mind, my thinking, by working with German dog trainers, as opposed to my father, who used a militaristic, hierarchical way of looking at the training paradigm. When I started working with the Germans in the 70s, they were looking at the wolf and how they hunt, and they said, there's our key. So I took that and went beyond that to embrace everything about canine psychology.
Well, maybe we should watch the clip right now. If you could set up that clip for us.
So
And
the question is, who is in control of who? So there's a female shepherd who's very so-called dominant, and then there's the young lab, who's supposedly submissive. And let's see how it plays out.
Okay.
So the two dogs have just encountered. Notice the shepherd shook it off. So they got close together, and that was stress-inducing in the shepherd. I apologize for something. Now look at the lip licking. Why is the dog is not actually showing appeasement behavior? It is paralyzing the shepherd. You can see the shepherd is tense and paralyzed, can't do anything. And the reason it can't do anything is the lab is controlling, paralyzing the shepherd by acting prey-like. So what the lab is doing with the lip licking and the vibration and laying down is acting prey-like. And here's another rule of nature is the prey controls the predator, not the other way around.
And the licking of the lips, it looked a lot like what puppies do to mothers when they're trying to get them
Right.
to regurgitate.
Yep. Well, a lot of this might be extraneous. Again, I apologize for amateur footage, but maybe we could fast forward a little bit and see if we get them back together.
That's what happens when you try to turn the dog trainer into a cinematographer.
Don't give me a camera.
Right.
So the shepherd, everything is, energy works on attraction. And now she's attracted to the lab, and the first level of indirect making contact is to urinate. She's kind of getting rid of some of the energy, it's not moving, so she urinates it.
Okay.
And now the lab is becoming prey, and prey controls predator, so she stops. We'll see if she stops here, and the shepherd has to stop.
So she's asking her to play,
Well, not logically speaking, not technically speaking,
but energetically.
but she's getting the shepherd to chase her. And by being the object of attraction, you have leverage if you know how to use it, i.e. go by feel. So the lab is vibrating very intensely. The shepherd is more paralyzed, but little by little, the shepherd is softening. And that running is starting to make the shepherd feel good. She's giving credit to the lab. And we're going to get into, I'm going to use human conceptual terminology for now, but as we go deeper into the canine mind here, I'll start to explain exactly what knowing means to a dog. So again, I apologize for the framing. So whenever the lab stops, the shepherd has to And then the lab deflects itself, and it's snooking around, and it's not focusing on the shepherd's eyes, which would trigger her. Hopefully I'll get to a play session, maybe this segment. Let's see, the lab is running and deflecting the shepherd's focus. The shepherd can't resist but follow. Now what's happening here too is they're becoming physically synchronized. And physical, when their body states get physically synchronized, which is the purpose of urinating, is deflecting attention onto a common object of attraction, they're each other's urine. As they get physically synchronized, they're becoming emotionally synchronized. Little by little, they're developing. Now look how the lab is starting to feel its power, so it's jumping at her face and pushing into her because she's starting to get, I'm running the show here, to put it into human terms. So she's feeling power. The shepherd's getting what the shepherd wants too, because she's getting a chance to participate. And at some point they had a great play session. It usually takes about 10 minutes for the charge to slowly unwind, and they smell each other's scent. And that's all part of deflecting their energy onto a common track. Now if they were in the wild, that kind of scenting would be, eventually they would come across the spoor or scent of a prey. And that would then gear them together into prey, into hunting together. That would be the bonding process. So that's what we have to do with our dogs. See how look at that lab, totally paralyzes the shepherd. Now the shepherd's getting some pleasure, which is why the tail's wagging. And I'm not going to put too much in there. Now what they're doing is they check each other's anal genital area. That's how they know how to plug into each other. And that feels good to the shepherd. She feels good being touched there. That's the real purpose. Now here's where the prey go. Now look, what's really cool there is they flip polarity. The shepherd is now becoming the prey for a few seconds, then they bind up again. But once they can flip polarity back and forth, the exchanging of prey and predator roles is what play is.
So that's what you mean by flipping polarity.
Yeah.
One becomes...
One's up, one's down, one's
right.
north, one's south. And look at this, that conversation between the prey and predator. And that look at that. Now the shepherd became the prey right there. And that feels great. It feels good to flip polarity. And now she's totally relaxed. And the lab is starting to get more and more confident, grab her, jump on her. And in 10 minutes, they're fast buddies. So if you had to say somebody's controlling somebody, I would say the lab is controlling the shepherd.
But most people would look at it and say, oh, the shepherd is definitely dominant. Look at how submissive the lab is acting.
Exactly, and look how rigid. Now, when I take such a dog like that into training, for protection training or any training, we look at the dominance and say, oops, that's unsureness, let's soften it. Let's
You mean the shepherd?
the shepherd would get more and more relaxed through the training. The training wouldn't be to max. If I was protection training that dog, I wouldn't maximize that intensity, I would relax it. And then you'll see the dog getting maxed. A good example between pack instincts and supple team energy is, I like to use the metaphor of the boxers. The boxers get in the middle of the ring and they glower at each other and they're staring at each other. Well, that's pack instinct.
Right.
But then you see, as soon as they go back to their corner, they go back to moving.
Right.
Because that's debilitating. That paralysis is debilitating.
Right.
As soon as they get back in their corner, they're being loosey-goosey and they're jumping and shadow boxing because they want to stay limber.
Sort of like how the shepherd was shaking it off
Exactly.
when they first met, and then
Right.
when the boxers are psyching each other out, that's sort of like the pack
Yes.
stuff, giving really psyching
Right.
each other up, getting each other a vibe so they can go out and punch and really expend a lot of energy. And right.
Yeah, but if they stayed in that paralysis, when you
Nothing
get
to
hit,
do.
you get hurt,
Right,
you
right.
have no stamina. So the reason they're trying to stay loosey-goosey, because when your muscles are warm, it doesn't hurt. You're fast, you have more power. So the team energy is when things are flowing. Pack instinct is when things are stuck. So the real purpose of the pack, like I said, if you look at the immediate moment energy theory, you can see all points of view. The real purpose of the pack is to infuse everybody with tension and stress.
Right.
And then they get all bollocksed up, and the only way it can come out is at a common object of attraction, and that would be the moose. That's the compulsion to go after a prey they cannot physically handle.
So the problem when people raise their dogs according to the pack hierarchy, when they do any of the Caesar Milan or the monks of Newsgate is when if they're just compounding the stress and compounding the stress and the
Yes.
tension, that causes aggression or fear.
Right. They're driving the stress deeper and deeper. The deeper you drive it, the more concentrated it gets. The more concentrated it gets, the more explosive when it finally comes out. So in the short term, it can look tremendously successful. But if you look at it a little more closely, you'll see that the dogs are getting deeper in conflict. And if you were to apply that paradigm to high levels of training, such as police dog work or bird dog work, anything that's really requires the dog to be free and operating in real time, being flexible to changing circumstances, those dogs fall apart. That's why I abandoned the dominance model, because they fell apart under high stress, under high change, high excitement, and when things are all new. They did not know how to respond.
And even when you are not doing the dominance hierarchy, but you don't understand what all that pack instinct is for, we've talked a lot about positive dog training and how that actually adds stress to the circuit.
Yeah.
Just as much as...
Right. If you don't know that the purpose of the group isn't companionship, it's to work together as a team to overcome high degree of resistance.
Just like the wolf has to kill a musk oxen, like a huge amount of resistance.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's why, for that same paradigm, is why the golden retriever may never go after the cars or chase the mailman, but he'll play with a ball all day long.
Right.
Because it's got this charge that needs to really get expended through an incredible amount of output. So if you don't give that output, it just builds up and up and up. And even if you're being positive and you're not providing purpose, which is team-directed behaviors that overcome challenges, the dog is turning that into stress, just like the cell phone. You put it in that charger, well, that is going to build up a charge, and it needs to come out. Sooner or later, that battery will explode.
And now we're even seeing golden retrievers actually chasing the mailman and chasing cars and having a
unfortunately,
lot of bad behavior, and that is probably due to the pack mentality, but also to the positive dog training.
It's also to the positive because it's all in denial of canine purpose. The purpose of the canine is to hunt as a team and overcome a challenge. So it's not to be, so you know what happened, I noticed it in the 60s, is you start to see breeders saying, we breed for good temperament. And what they meant was friendly. So they were breeding friendly to friendly. And what they were actually breeding was more and more hyper-nervousness. And now we got to the point where golden retrievers are so friendly, they're basically a vibrating nerve ending. And it just charges up, and then boom, it comes out.
And the purpose of a golden retriever is to go out and and to chase and to jump in a freezing cold pond over and over and over again and grab that duck and bring it back and that's their imprint. So that's why they go nuts over the ball, right?
Exactly.
And people aren't understanding what their real function is.
Yeah, so what's happened now in the Goldens, if you look at them now, they have slavish devotion to owner. And they're obsessed, it's like OCD. Whereas if you go back to the 60s, they were really rugged breed, very rugged. They loved the cold water, they loved doing the retrieving all day long, but they were steady under a 12-gauge shotgun. And now I hear of Goldens that are jumping out of apartments because the wind whistling through the elevator shaft.
They're so nervous.
Yeah, and they're light-colored and finer boned. So all the breeds, once they started selecting for friendliness, they bred the heart, which is purpose, out of the breed, and that's the root of all evil.
And we're going off on a little bit of a tangent, but people don't get dogs for a purpose anymore, and so they don't. If they get a golden retriever, they don't understand.
The bond flows from the purpose, and the metaphor I like to use for that is a team.
Right.
A team that is organized around a purpose, that forms a lifelong bond between the teammates because they accomplish, even if they have a losing season, but they play really great and they work together, they did the best they could, and they overcome a purpose, they will have a bond. Whereas a losing team that doesn't have that ethic, I like to say, has a lot of personality. So related to the phenomenon of getting away from purpose is a fixation on personality. So people say, oh, my dog has this great personality, they breed for personality, the breeders do. They call that temperament, and it's not temperament. Temperament is about turning energy into stress for the purpose of teamwork.
Of a goal.
Yeah, and your dog has that mechanism in there, and you need to know how to access it and tap into it and work with it. And the companionship flows from that dynamic. So it's a wonderful side effect, but it's a byproduct. It's not a goal in and of itself.
So for the average Golden Retriever owner or Labrador Retriever owner, they don't have a 12-gauge shotgun and they don't shoot ducks anymore.
Right.
What can they do to create that bond? What can be the common purpose?
You know, I think we should make that a focus of a show. How do you play moose with your dog? How to be the moose for your dog? But that's what they got to do. They got to learn how to be the moose to their dog, not the slavish object of attraction, and how to recognize temperament and to encourage temperament and work with temperament as opposed to feeding personality. Another word I like to say about personality is it's actually a defensive response to stress. It's a very good coping mechanism. So you find yourself in a cocktail party for the first 10 minutes, and it's nice to have personality.
Right.
You can get through those first 10 minutes.
Right.
Or you're stuck in an elevator and you got to make constrained, forced conversation.
Right.
Well, personality is really adaptive for those first 5-10 minutes or 2 minutes in the elevator. But it's not, you don't feel good when you're in your personality. It's not your true character.
You're right.
Your core.
Yeah.
So what I want to encourage is people to look for the core and to work with the core. And at the moment, people are thinking that the pack instincts are the core, and that's not it. So I like to give the example that a prison community is a true pack instinct, is a true dominant hierarchy. It's not a team. And you know, we don't want to live in that way.
Well, since we're almost at the end, I thought we would end with a quote from David Meach, who studied the wolves in Ellesmere Island, St. Ellesmere Island up in the Arctic, and spent a lot of time with those wolves, and he's sort of he's the premier wolf biologist, right?
They call him the top dog of wolf biologists.
But I found an interesting thing he had to say, and I'll read it to you. It says, the concept, nature, and importance of the dominance hierarchy or pecking order itself in many species are in dispute. Similarly, in a natural wolf pack, dominance is not manifested as a pecking order and seems to have much less significance than the results of studies of captive wolves has implied. In a natural wolf pack, the dominance rules bear no resemblance to those of the pecking order, that of a group of similar individuals competing for rank.
Right.
And that seems to be a little bit of a turn for him.
Yes, he was very much a pack theorist in the 70s and 80s. And like I say, in the 70s, I divined a new structure. Yes, we believe there's a dominance thing because nobody else has a model.
Right, there's no other way
There
to
is
see it,
structure.
right.
How else can we explain it? Plus, a personality is so vivid at 1,000 yards through binoculars.
Right.
Wow, that must be the dominant personality. Right. So a personality theory, and this is always going to lead you to a dominant model. And in the absence of any other model, people are at a loss. So they're questioning it, but they're not providing a model.
They're not giving you another answer.
What I like to point out to people is that the artificial intelligence research engineers at MIT, Santa Fe, San Jose, wherever, are not using operant classical conditioning and dominant hierarchy to make doggy robots or artificial robots. They're looking for some mathematical algorithm which is much closer to what I'm saying than a dominant hierarchy. So, but what I do like to say that something's going on inside the dog that's not math, even though the math might describe it.
Right.
It's still not math. So whoever has the strongest feeling goes first. Everybody happily follows. That will never get you off track. That's always true.
That's a great way to leave us today.
Okay.
And so join us next time for more amazing, interesting things about dog behavior.